Alright, gather around you pathetic history buffs and those of you who still think TikTok trends are peak human innovation. Tonight, the Midnight Meme Historian is here to drag one of history's most celebrated queens through the mud. Quite literally, considering her beauty routine, forget your modern filter queens and your botox-addled reality stars. We're talking about Elizabeth I. The original influencer who proved that vanity is not just a sin, it's a slow, agonizing death sentence. She was basically the first CEO of a pyramid scheme where the product was your own demise and the only return on investment was a face that looked like a ghost who lost a fight with a bag of flour. Yeah, her glow-up was more of a blow-up, and not in a good way. Now, let's peel back the layers of propaganda and get to the festering core of the Elizabethan era. This was a time when monarchs were basically the original pop star, constantly curating their public image only instead of a perfectly lit selfie. They had painters who'd smooth out the edges, if you caught my drift. Elizabeth, bless her ambitious little heart, understood the assignment. Look divine. Look untouchable. Look like a porcelain doll carved by angels. The problem? Her skin was probably closer to a potato left in the sun too long. So, what did a savvy, power-hungry woman do? She turned to the beauty products of the day, which, in a delightful twist of historical irony, were basically a cocktail of industrial-grade poisons. Because, let's be real, who needs a skincare routine when you can just apply a thin layer of pure, unadulterated lead directly to your epidermis? It's like a detox tea, but instead of flushing toxins, it just introduces new, more exciting ones. The crown jewel of her toxic vanity kit was something called Venetian Cereus. Sounds fancy, right? Like a secret ingredient in a high-end serum that promises eternal youth. Spoiler alert! It gets worse. Venetian Cereus wasn't some mystical herb or rare botanical extract. Oh no! My easily duped friends! It was a delightful blend of white lead and vinegar. Yes, you heard that correctly. Lead. As in, the stuff we now meticulously remove from old paint and gasoline because it turns your brain into a scrambled egg. Back then, they slapped it on their faces like it was the latest Fenty beauty drop. Only instead of giving you that Rarana glow, it gave you a slow, agonizing death. It's like buying a brand new electric vehicle today, only to find out it runs on highly toxic sludge that leaks directly into your nervous system. What could possibly go wrong? This wasn't some niche, underground beauty hack, either. This was mainstream. This was a TikTok trend of its time. Only instead of doing questionable dance moves, people were literally poisoning themselves to achieve a pallor that screamed, "I'm so rich, I don't have to work outdoors." And also, "I'm slowly dying." It was the ultimate flex. Imagine a modern influencer peddling a natural face cream that has secretly just a mixture of fentanyl and glitter. That's Elizabethan beauty standards for you. And Elizabeth, our regal trendsetter, was leading the charge. Unknowingly becoming the poster child for what we at Midnight Meme Historian like to call historical fails on an epic scale, she truly was the alpha and omega of self-sabotage, proving that sometimes the only thing worse than your enemies is your makeup bag. The goal, you see, was to achieve that ghostly white complexion. A stark contrast to the sun-kissed peasants toiling in the fields. Because nothing says, "I'm better than you," quite like looking like a freshly exhumed corpse. This obsession with paleness was practically a status symbol, a giant neon sign screaming, "I have never seen a day of honest labor, and my circulatory system is slowly giving up." It's like today's billionaires who brag about never flying commercial. But back then, it was about proving you had enough servants to avoid vitamin D entirely. And our Queen Elizabeth was rocking this look harder than a goth kid at a summer camp. Only her pallor wasn't a fashion statement. It was a symptom. Call it the original. I woke up like this. Look, if this means with severe heavy metal poisoning and the science behind it, oh, there was none. This was an era where doctors still thought leeches were a viable medical treatment for, well, everything. And that, balancing your humors, involved a lot of bloodletting and praying. So, asking them to understand the neurotoxic effects of lead was like asking a modern flat earther to explain quantum physics. They just weren't equipped. It's like when your eccentric aunt tells you essential oils can cure cancer. They meant well, or at least they thought they did. But they were operating on a level of scientific understanding that would make a caveman scratch his head. They were basically using the vibes approach to medicine, which, as it turns out, isn't great when dealing with things like lead. So, Elizabeth, with her keen eye for public image and her apparent disdain for basic biology, layered on that series. Day after day, year after year. Every time she dabbed that white paste onto her face, she was essentially signing another paragraph of her own death warrant in very small, very lead-infused print. She was, in essence, her own worst enemy, dressed in a fabulous gown and a face full of poison. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The most powerful woman in England, brought low not by foreign invaders or rebellious dukes, but by her own foundation makeup. It's the kind of tragic irony that would make a South Park episode look understated. And the effects. Well, let's just say it wasn't a gentle fading into the night. We're talking hair loss, skin, corrosion, rotten teeth, a veritable smorgasbord of physical decline. Her face became a canvas of decay, with the cirrus acting like a cruel, slow-motion filter, making her look worse with every application. Imagine going to a fancy dress party and slowly dissolving throughout the evening. That was Elizabeth's life. By the end, her face was a scarred, pock-marked wasteland, a monument to her vanity and the toxic beauty standards of her time. One historical account even described her as having a face like a death mask. Holy shit. Really? Yes! This actually happened! No, we're not making this up. It's like those old-school influencers who went too hard on the tanning beds in the 90s, and now look like a leather couch that has seen better days, only with more internal organ damage. The Queen's vanity wasn't just about looking good. It was about maintaining power. In a world dominated by men, Elizabeth had to project an image of unwavering strength, purity, and almost supernatural health. But behind the thick layers of lead and the elaborate wigs, her body was essentially staging a slow-motion rebellion. Every day, her skin was becoming more damaged, her memory failing, her temper flaring. It's like a modern politician trying to project an image of calm stability while their entire campaign staff is actively sabotaging them from the inside. The optics were pristine, but the reality was a medical dumpster fire. And all for a look that today would get you cast as the ghost in a low-budget horror film. The irony, my friends, is as thick as Elizabeth's foundation. This wasn't just a royal problem, though Elizabeth's extensive use made her a prime example of the dangers of blindly following trends. Wealthy women across Europe were lining their cosmetic bags with these literal death traps. They were all basically engaging in a deadly beauty pageant, seeing who could achieve the whitest, most lead-infused complexion before their teeth fell out or their minds completely unraveled. It's like the early days of social media, where everyone was chasing likes with increasingly outlandish and self-destructive stunts, only instead of online clout, they were chasing a pale glow that came with a side order of organ failure. It truly was an epidemic of toxic beauty, a collective delusion where looking good meant slowly becoming a biohazard. And yet, despite the obvious physical deterioration, the allure of the cirrus persisted. Why? Because the alternative, a natural, sun-kissed complexion, was associated with the working class? It screamed. I spend my days outside, probably smelling of dirt and desperation. And in Elizabethan society, smelling of dirt and desperation was a far worse fate than going insane from heavy metal poisoning. Priorities. People. It's the same logic that makes people buy a $4,000 handbag when they can barely afford rent, because perception is everything, even if that perception is slowly killing you. Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, was truly a product of her time, a queen who sacrificed her health on the altar of public image, leaving us with a truly dark humor history lesson about the things we do for beauty. Just ask yourself, would you trade your liver for a flawless complexion? Most people back then probably would have ended. So, next time you see a celebrity promoting some questionable wellness product or an influencer boasting about a dangerous diet, Just remember Elizabeth I, the original trendsetter who practically invented the dye for beauty movement. She was the one who normalized self-poisoning for aesthetic gain. She walked so that today's detox tea peddlers could run. And she did it all with a face that was slowly turning into a toxic waste dump. It's almost inspiring, in a deeply messed up, morbid kind of way. What do you think, gentle viewers? Was it worth it for Elizabeth to look like a porcelain zombie queen, only to suffer such a gruesome decline? Let me know in the comments below, because I am genuinely curious if anyone out there would trade their brain cells for that ethereal glow. Your answers will probably tell us more about modern society than they do about history, which is truly depressing. Let's dive deeper into the horrifying reality of what this meant for Elizabeth and her loyal, equally deluded court. Imagine the royal chambers, usually a hive of political intrigue and whispered scandals. Now, add the acrid smell of vinegar, the faint metallic temps of lead, and the constant underlying hum of human organs slowly shutting down. It's less like a royal palace and more like a beautifully decorated slow-motion chemical spill. Every morning, the Queen's ladies-in-waiting would perform a ritual that was less about beauty and more about embalming. They'd meticulously apply layers of this deadly concoction, turning their living monarch into a painted corpse, one stroke at a time. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion, only the train is a human being, and the engineer is a beauty influencer from 5 centuries ago. And it wasn't just the Venetian Cirrus. Oh no, that would be too simple, too merciful. Elizabeth's beauty regimen was a veritable buffet of bad ideas. She used mercury to redden her lips. Because why just poison your face when you can get your mouth in on the action too? Mercury, for those of you who skipped chemistry class to watch cat videos, is another delightful neurotoxin that causes tremors, memory loss, and general mental deterioration. So, while she was slowly losing her mind from the lead, she was also getting a bonus dose of cognitive decline from her lipstick. It's like a modern tech bro microdosing psychedelics, only instead of finding enlightenment, she was finding early onset dementia. What a time to be alive! Or rather, to be slowly dying. The paradox of Elizabeth's reign is truly a goldmine for midnight meme historians. Here was a brilliant, cunning, and politically astute queen who steered England through one of its most glorious periods. She faced down the Spanish Armada, outmaneuvered her rivals, and established a legacy that still resonates today. And yet, this same sharp mind was somehow convinced that rubbing lead and mercury on her face was a good idea. It asked the ultimate example of how even the smartest people can fall victim to societal pressures and ridiculous trends. It's like watching a Nobel laureate confidently explain the geopolitical implications of a TikTok dance challenge. Intelligence, it turns out, is not always a shield against sheer, unadulterated dumbassery. Consider her public appearances. She was adored, idolized, almost worshipped. Her image was everywhere. Paintings, coins, tapestries. But these were all heavily filtered, airbrushed versions of reality. The artists, keen to keep their heads attached to their bodies, depicted her as eternally youthful, radiant, and undeniably beautiful. The reality was a queen whose face was a patchwork of scars, open sores, and the cumulative damage of decades of lead poisoning. It's the ultimate catfishing story! Only instead of a dating app, it was an entire nation being misled. Every portrait was essentially a carefully curated Instagram feed, hiding the ugly truth behind a veil of propaganda and arsenic, and the people ate it up. Because who questions the beauty of their all-powerful monarch? That's how you lose your head! Literally, the medical community of the time, bless their ignorant hearts, was no help. They would probably just prescribe more leeches or a good old bloodletting for whatever new ailment Elizabeth developed. Feeling a bit forgetful, Your Majesty. Perhaps your humors are imbalanced. A pint of blood should sort you right out. It's like going to a doctor today with a rare autoimmune disease and them telling you to just drink more water and get some sun. They had no clue! Absolutely none! The concept of heavy metal poisoning was about as foreign to them as the internet is to your grandpa. And our queen, in her regal wisdom, just kept applying the poison. Trusting in the wisdom of her era, S equivalent of a naturopath selling detox products on Facebook Marketplace. This slow, deliberate, self-destruction wasn't just physical, it affected her mental state too. Lead poisoning is known to cause irritability, depression, paranoia, and memory loss. So, imagine a powerful monarch surrounded by enemies and sycophants, slowly losing her grip on reality, all while trying to project an image of infallible strength. Her infamous temper, her sudden rages, her erratic decision-making, were these the signs of a ruthless leader or simply the neurological side effects of her daily beauty routine? It's like a modern CEO having a meltdown during an earnings call, only to later find out their daily smoothie was secretly laced with The line between tyrannical genius and ledaddled madness becomes incredibly blurry. And the cost, not just to her health, but to the royal coffers. These beauty products were not cheap. They were the luxury brands of their day, exclusively for the elite who could afford to literally pay for their own demise. So, while peasants were starving and the country was teetering on the brink of war, Elizabeth was spending vast sums on cosmetics that were actively dissolving her face. It's like a modern government spending billions on a vanity project. Say, a border wall that doesn't work? While its citizens are struggling to afford healthcare, the priorities of the powerful never change, do they? It's always about the image, never about the sensible decision. Especially when that sensible decision involves not rubbing poison on your face. The sheer audacity of it all, the collective blindness to the obvious consequences, is what makes this truly tragic and hilariously stupid at the same time. People saw Elizabeth's face deteriorating, her hair falling out, her body weakening, and still, they probably thought, wow, the queen is so dedicated to her craft. What an icon. No one was saying, hey, maybe that white stuff you're putting on your face is actually killing you. Because, in those days, if the queen did it, it must be divine. Not self-inflicted medical malpractice. It's like when a popular celebrity endorses a problematic product, and millions of fans flock to buy it, despite all the red flags. The power of influence, even if that influence is leading you to an early grave, is truly terrifying. So, as we reflect on Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, let's not just remember her as a strong leader. Let's remember her as the ultimate cautionary tale. The woman who proved that chasing an impossible beauty standard can literally kill you. She was the original lead poisoning influencer, a grim warning from history that some trends are just not worth following, no matter how many likes they get from the royal courts. And what's truly wild is that even today, in our supposedly enlightened age, people are still falling for similar scams, just with different ingredients. We've traded lead for microplastics, but the underlying stupidity, that, my friends, remains eternally fashionable. And here's where the Midnight Meme historian asks the big questions. If Elizabeth I were alive today, would she be shilling activated charcoal toothpastes that do nothing? Or perhaps endorsing a detox cleanse that involves only kale smoothies and pure misery? What do you think her TikTok would look like? Would she be filtered to oblivion? Or would she embrace her decaying face for an authentic look? And seriously, would you trade a few years off your life for a perfectly flawless face, even if that flawless face was slowly killing you? Be honest in the comments. Don't be shy. This is your chance to tell history to stop being so damn stupid, or at least admit you'd probably fall for the same trap. Now, let us fast forward a bit from Elizabeth Essanisha dive into toxic cosmetology and see how this delightful little habit progressed. Imagine a 500-year-old version of a social media before and after montage, except the after involves more pustules and less actual skin. Our queen, in her infinite wisdom, didn't just slather on the Cirrus for a special occasion. Oh no, this was her daily vibe. This was her brand. She lived and breathed and slowly died from that lead-infused foundation. It's like a modern vlogger who refuses to leave the house without a full face of makeup, only every layer applied is shaving a day off their life. The dedication, truly horrifying. The initial motivations were understandable, in a twisted, medieval kind of way. Smallpox, the bane of Elizabethan existence. It swept through populations like a poorly managed server update, leaving survivors with faces looking like a lunar landscape. Elizabeth herself contracted smallpox in her late 20s. And while she survived, The disease left her with a pockmarked complexion. Now, for a queen who relied heavily on projecting an image of divine beauty and youthful vigor, this was a PR disaster of epic proportions. It's like a Hollywood actor known for their stunning looks suddenly developing a severe allergic reaction right before a major premiere. Panic stations. So, what's a queen to do when her face resembles a cheese grater? Double down on the toxic makeup, of course. The Cyrus, with its opaque, chalky consistency, was perfect for covering up those delightful smallpox scars. It was basically the world's most dangerous spackle. She wasn't just trying to look pale anymore. She was trying to look like she hadn't just survived a biological weapon attack. It's the ultimate cover-up, both literally and figuratively. She was essentially putting a fresh coat of poisonous paint on a crumbling wall, hoping no one would notice the structural integrity was utterly gone. Spoiler alert. People noticed, but no one dared mention it. That's how you get your head on a spike in Tudor England. The problem, as anyone with a modicum of common sense would eventually realize, is that lead doesn't just sit innocently on your skin. It gets absorbed. It infiltrates your bloodstream. It starts having a little party with your nervous system, inviting all its toxic friends. We're talking about a chemical invasion. A silent coup against your own internal organs. This wasn't just a beauty routine. It was a slow, deliberate form of self-torture, disguised as glamour. It's like a modern fitness fad that promises incredible results, but secretly involves ingesting a tiny amount of rat poison every day. The short-term visual gains were quickly overshadowed by the long-term, irreversible damage. And yet, the show, or rather, the poisoning, had to go on. As she aged, the situation became even more grotesque. The Cyrus, meant to conceal, actually highlighted the decay. The thick layers would crack and peel, revealing the increasingly ravaged skin beneath. Imagine a cheap Halloween mask, slowly disintegrating on your face, revealing the real horror underneath. That was Elizabeth's daily reality. Her teeth, already under siege from the era's appalling dental hygiene and sugary diets, were also falling victim to the lead. Descriptions from the time speak of her black and rotten teeth. It's like a modern reality TV star who gets veneers that are too white. Only in Elizabeth's case, the too white was her face, and the rotten was her entire oral cavity. Truly a sight to behold if you had a strong stomach and a severe case of historical voyeurism. And her wigs. The wigs. As her natural hair thinned and fell out, likely another delightful side effect of her lead addiction, Elizabeth resorted to increasingly elaborate wigs, often fiery red like her own hair. These weren't just fashion statements. They were another layer of deception, another carefully constructed facade to maintain the illusion of youth and vitality. It's like a modern celebrity going through a public breakdown, but still showing up to red carpet events in a designer wig, pretending everything is fine. The sheer effort involved in maintaining this elaborate charade, while her body was slowly failing her, is both commendable and deeply tragic. The dedication to the bit, even if the bit was killing her, was unparalleled. The most chilling aspect of this whole debacle is the lack of alternatives. What else could she do? Sunscreen wasn't a thing. Dermatology was millennia away. Her options for covering her smallpox scars were limited to prayer, thick veils, or a face full of lead. Given the stakes of her public image, the choice for her was clear, even if it was clearly insane. It's like being offered two terrible options. Vote for a candidate who clearly believes in lizard people, or one who thinks the moon landing was faked by squirrels. Sometimes, history just presents you with a menu of pure chaos, and you have to pick the least immediately deadly option. Elizabeth chose the slow, stylish demise. Her temper, which was legendary, likely worsened with the lead poisoning. Imagine a powerful woman already prone to dramatic outbursts, now suffering from chronic irritability and paranoia caused by heavy metals dissolving her brain. It's like a modern Twitter CEO already prone to impulsive, rage-fueled decisions. Now running on 4 hours of sleep and a diet of Red Bull and conspiracy theories, her court lived in a constant state of fear, never knowing when the queen would explode in a fit of pique, possibly because she had just ingested another dose of brain-melting cosmetic. You thought your boss was moody? Try working for someone whose daily skincare routine is actively making them lose their mind. That's true power, folks. The power to slowly self-destruct and make everyone around you miserable while doing it. The psychological toll must have been immense. Elizabeth was known for her sharp intellect and her mastery of political maneuvering. To feel her mind slowly slipping, her memory failing, her temper becoming uncontrollable. It must have been a private hell, masked by a public veneer of unwavering strength. It's like a brilliant artist who slowly loses their eyesight, but continues to paint, relying on memory and touch. Only in Elizabeth's case, it was her brain, the very instrument of her power, that was slowly being eroded. The ultimate irony for a woman who prided herself on her intelligence and control. Her body was betraying her, and she was willingly helping it along with her makeup brush. Some historians, in their infinite wisdom, try to downplay the lead poisoning, suggesting it was just one factor among many. But let's be real, slathering a known neurotoxin on your face daily for decades is not just a factor. It's like saying a small hole in a dam is just a factor in the ensuing flood. It's the primary driver of the catastrophe. It's an inconvenient truth that tarnishes the Gloriana image, the myth of the perfect, immortal queen. But here at Midnight Meme Historia, we're not afraid to poke holes in pretty myths, especially when those myths are literally poisoning people. Truth, as they say, is often stranger and far more toxic than fiction. The enduring image of Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen with her pale face and elaborate gowns, is a testament to the power of propaganda and historical whitewash. We see her as this almost divine figure, untouched by human frailties. But the reality was a woman slowly being consumed by her own vanity. Her body and mind betraying her, all for the sake of looking good by the grotesque standards of her time. It is a harsh reminder that even the most powerful individuals can be utterly powerless against the absurd demands of society, especially when those demands involve a slow, painful demise. And you thought chasing the perfect influencer aesthetic was a modern problem. Please. History's been doing it longer, and with far more deadly consequences. So, when you consider the legacy of Elizabeth I, remember not just the political triumphs and the cultural flourishing, but also the agonizing, self-inflicted decline. Remember the lead? The Mercury? The rotten teeth? The failing mind? Remember that even queens can be victims of their own image, especially when that image requires them to slowly poison themselves into oblivion. It's a brutal, unfiltered history lesson, straight from the Midnight Meme Historian archives. A testament to the enduring human capacity for self-deception in the name of looking good. What a magnificent dumpster fire of a beauty routine. Right. And you thought your bad haircut was a tragedy. Now, pause for a moment and consider the sheer mental gymnastics required to ignore the obvious. Elizabeth's attendants, her physicians, her closest advisors, they had to see the decline. They had to connect the dots, even faintly. But the social hierarchy of the time, the absolute power of the monarch, created a force field of denial so strong it could withstand a direct hit from a cannonball, let alone a little common sense. It asks, like watching a modern corporate board meeting, where everyone knows the CEO's latest innovation is a ticking time bomb, but nobody dares speak up because optics and synergy, and I'd want to get fired. The cowardice of convenience is truly a timeless human trait. This wasn't just some quaint, bygone era's bizarre beauty ritual. It was a societal pressure cooker where the steam was toxic and the pressure was absolute. For women of the court, mimicking the queen's alabaster pilar was not just fashionable. It was practically an act of fealty. If the queen was going to slowly kill herself for beauty, then by God, so were her ladies. It's the ultimate example of trickle-down toxicity, where the poison started at the top and seeped its way down through the ranks of the aristocracy. Imagine your favorite influencer promoting a skincare line that you later find out uses industrial solvents. That's the vibe. Only with more syphilis and public executions in the background. The irony, of course, is that while Elizabeth was meticulously painting her face into a death mask, her political enemies were probably wishing she would just drop dead already. Little did they know, she was doing their job for them, one lead-infused brushstroke at a time. She was essentially her own deep-cover assassin, slowly taking herself out from the inside. It's the kind of dark humor that would make even Rick Gervais wince, because the punchline is a queen's slow, agonizing demise. All for the sake of a trend that literally aged her faster than a banana in a microwave. And people wonder why history can be depressing. This, my friends, is why. Her final years were a miserable spectacle. The once vibrant, sharp-witted queen was prone to long periods of melancholy, bursts of extreme anger, and bouts of utter exhaustion. She even refused to lie down, reportedly standing for days, propped up by cushions, a grim testament to her suffering and perhaps her growing paranoia. This wasn't graceful aging. This was a body giving up the ghost, ravaged by decades of self-inflicted poisoning. It's like watching a celebrity whose plastic surgery has gone horribly wrong. Only in Elizabeth's case, the internal damage was far more profound than just a slightly askew facelift. Her entire internal system was screaming for a refund, but there was no customer service for lead poisoning in the 16th century. And the narrative spun around her death. Oh, it was pure PR spin. Official reports blamed it on old age, melancholy, or perhaps a touch of divine will. No one, absolutely no one, was going to suggest that the Virgin Queen's demise was accelerated by her persistent application of industrial toxins to her face. That would be like a modern news report claiming a prominent politician's sudden health issues were due to their obsessive diet of deep-fried butter and pure sugar. Instead of the convenient stress narrative, history, it turns out, is full of spin doctors, just with more quill pens and less Twitter feeds. The truth, in this case, was far too ugly, far too inconvenient, and far too reflective of the era's collective stupidity to be openly acknowledged. So, the next time you see someone agonizing over a zit or meticulously sculpting their eyebrows, remember Elizabeth I, the woman who took beauty as pain to a whole new, horrifying level. She embraced lead poisoning as a fashion statement. She essentially monetized her own slow death, and her legacy, despite all the attempts to sanitize it, stands as a brutal history lesson. It's a reminder that sometimes the most celebrated figures in history were also the most bafflingly, tragically, unbelievably stupid. And that, my friends, is why Midnight Meme Historian exists. To drag these historical figures out of the dusty textbooks and roast them over an open flame of truth and sarcasm. Because if we don't laugh at their idiocy, we might just cry at our own. What's truly fascinating and horrifying is how this obsession with a specific, unnatural aesthetic managed to supersede any instinct for self-preservation. Elizabeth, a monarch whose survival was predicated on her shrewdness, her ability to read people and situations, utterly failed to read the giant, flashing danger poison sign plastered all over her makeup. It is like a genius computer hacker who can breach any system, but keeps falling for phishing scams that promise free crypto. The cognitive dissonance is truly astounding, a testament to how deeply ingrained societal beauty standards can warp even the sharpest minds. She was a master strategist on the global stage, but a complete novice when it came to not self-destructing her own face. The ultimate unfiltered history moment, indeed. This also begs the question, how much of her legend was actually her? And how much was the performance of a woman battling her own deteriorating body and mind? Was her infamous Heart of a King's speech a moment of pure, unadulterated strength? Or a defiant roar from a queen who is secretly fighting off lead-induced delirium? The layers of historical interpretation get thicker than Hasirus, don't they? It's like trying to understand a modern influencer's motivational speech, knowing full well they were probably just reading off a teleprompter while their entire life is a curated illusion. Elizabeth, I was the original method actor, embodying her role as queen, even as the lead was methodically disassembling her from the inside out. Truly a dedicated performer, even if the stage was her own grave. And what about her relationships? Imagine trying to woo a foreign prince or negotiate a treaty with a face that is literally decaying and a mind that is periodically The sheer diplomatic skill required to project an image of power and health under those circumstances is almost as impressive as her political achievements. It is like a modern CEO trying to close a billion-dollar deal while battling a severe case of food poisoning and actively hallucinating. The ability to fake it till you make it reaches truly heroic, or perhaps pathologically delusional, levels in Elizabeth's case. She wasn't just a queen. She was a master illusionist, making her chronic self-poisoning disappear behind a veil of regal mystique. The fashion of the time, with its high ruffs and elaborate gowns, also played a role in this macabre beauty ritual. The ruff, a towering collar that framed the face, drew even more attention to the queen's pale visage. It was like a giant arrow pointing directly at her face, essentially screaming, "Look at my impossibly white, lead-encrusted skin." Every element of her public presentation was designed to reinforce this toxic ideal, creating a feedback loop of vanity and self-destruction. It's like a modern fashion trend that involves wearing clothes made of scratchy, uncomfortable materials that slowly irritate your skin, but everyone wears them because they're Sometimes, looking good is just about looking like you're suffering, but in a very stylish way. This whole saga is a prime example of why we, at Midnight, meme historian, believe in unfiltered history. The sanitized versions, the ones that gloss over the gruesome details and the sheer stupidity, do a disservice to the past. They turn historical figures into cardboard cutouts, devoid of their messy, contradictory, and often deeply foolish humanity. Elizabeth, I wasn't just Gloriana. She was also the queen who willingly pickled her own brain in lead for the sake of appearances. And that, my friends, is a far more compelling and darkly hilarious story than any fairy tale. It's history for adults, for those of us with a strong stomach and a healthy dose of cynicism. So, let's hear it for Elizabeth I, the original lead poisoning. She may have saved England from invasion, but she couldn't save herself from a bad case of toxic vanity. Her reign was a beacon of power and progress, but her face was a canvas of decay and delusion. It's the ultimate history roast, isn't it? A powerful queen brought down not by a foreign army, but by her own makeup artist. What truly gets under my skin is the continued relevance of this story. We still fall for the same old tricks, just with different labels. We are still chasing impossible beauty standards, just with different toxins. The human capacity for self-deception in the name of looking good is truly infinite and infinitely stupid. Speaking of infinite stupidity, how many of you out there have tried some questionable wellness hack you saw online, only to feel worse? Be honest, spill the tea in the comments. Did you drink celery juice for a month and achieve nothing but a serious craving for pizza? Did you try an all-natural face mask that gave you a rash? Don't pretend you haven't. We've all been there, chasing that elusive glow, just like Elizabeth. The only difference is, our mistakes usually don't involve literal heavy metals. Yet? Give it a few years. I'm sure some TikTok influencer will figure out how to monetize radioactive face masks. This is the dark humor history that keeps me up at night. People, the past isn't just past. It's a mirror reflecting our own absurdities. And what did Elizabeth's court think of all this? Did anyone, just one brave soul, pull her aside and say, "Your Majesty, with all due respect, your face is melting, and you seem to be losing your mind. Perhaps we should lay off the lead." Probably not. Because in absolute monarchies, questioning the Queen's fashion choices is a direct path to the Tower of London. Or worse, to having your own face slowly painted with ceruse. It's the ultimate example of a yes-men culture gone horribly, toxically wrong. Imagine a modern celebrity surrounded by sycophants who tell them every terrible idea is brilliant. That was Elizabeth's court, only with more beheadings and far less social media managers trying to spin the disaster. The power dynamics of the past, they were a real trip, weren't they? And by trip, I mean trip directly into an early grave with a very white face. This whole story is a goldmine for Midnight Meme historian, illustrating how collective delusion and the pursuit of superficial ideals can lead to truly disastrous outcomes, even for the most powerful individuals. It's a sarcastic documentary of human folly, a brutal history lesson about vanity, power, and the terrifying lack of scientific understanding. Elizabeth I, in her poisoned glory, serves as a permanent, ghostly reminder that sometimes the best way to rule is to first make sure you're not actively dissolving your own brain. A simple tip, really, but one that apparently eluded an entire era of so-called sophistication. So, next time you're scrolling through Instagram and see some perfectly filtered, impossibly poreless skin, just remember Elizabeth I. Remember the lead, the Mercury, the rotten teeth, and the slow descent into madness. Remember that behind every flawless facade, there might just be a very ugly, very toxic truth. Because in the grand, absurd tapestry of history, the greatest leaders are often just as prone to monumental stupidity as the rest of us. Especially when it comes to looking good. This is your uncensored roast of history, telling you that some beauty standards are simply not worth dying for. And if you still think otherwise, well, I have some lovely lead-based foundation to sell you. It'll give you that ethereal, ghostly glow. Just don't ask about the side effects. And speaking of side effects, what modern beauty trends do you think will be roasted by future midnight meme historians 500 years from now? Will it be the lip fillers that make everyone look like a perpetually surprised fish? The excessive plastic surgery that turns perfectly normal faces into uncanny valley residents? Or maybe the insane filters that give everyone the same alien smooth skin? Let me know your predictions in the comments. Who will be the next Elizabeth I? The next historical fail we'll all laugh at centuries from now. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that we never learn, and we always find new, innovative ways to make ourselves look ridiculous, and sometimes even poison ourselves, all for the fleeting approval of others. It's a dark comedy, truly, and we're all just playing our parts. The enduring myth of Elizabeth I, the iconic virgin queen with her porcelain skin, serves as a potent reminder of how deeply ingrained and destructive societal beauty standards can be. It wasn't just about personal vanity. It was about political performance. In an age where a queen's body was a symbol of the nation, any physical imperfection could be interpreted as a weakness, a chink in the armor of the state. So, Elizabeth's pursuit of a flawless, lead-infused complexion wasn't just a personal choice. It was a bizarre act of political theater, a silent declaration that her health, her very being, was secondary to the image she presented to the world. It's like a modern leader insisting on wearing an absurdly expensive, ill-fitting wig, even as their poll numbers plummet, all because they think it projects an image of strength. The delusion runs deep. And the cost of this delusion wasn't just to Elizabeth. Imagine the countless aristocratic women who, seeing their queen's pristine on the surface complexion, eagerly adopted the same deadly routine. It was a mass poisoning disguised as high fashion, a lethal trend that swept through the upper echelons of society. They were all basically signing up for a slow-motion suicide pact, a collective sacrifice on the altar of unattainable beauty. It est like a widespread social media challenge where everyone tries to eat the most amount of Tide Pods, only less immediate and far more subtle. The sheer scale of this self-inflicted harm is a grim testament to the power of influence and the tragic human tendency to prioritize superficial appearance over actual well-being. The doctors of the era, meanwhile, were probably scratching their heads, baffled by the sudden surge in bizarre ailments among the wealthy. Oh! The Countess has developed a terrible case of melancholy and her teeth are falling out. Must be a bad alignment of the stars, more leeches. They had no concept of toxicology, no understanding that the very substances their patients were using to enhance their beauty were simultaneously dismantling their bodies from the inside out. It's like a modern medical professional trying to treat a vaping-related lung disease with medieval remedies. The disconnect between cause and effect was so vast, it was almost comical if it wasn't so utterly tragic. This is why we need history for adults, folks. Because the truth is often far more absurd and brutal than the sanitized versions they teach you in school. Consider the political implications. Here was a queen who, by all accounts, was incredibly sharp, cunning, and fiercely independent. Yet, her most personal daily ritual was actively undermining her mental and physical faculties. How many critical decisions were made under the influence of lead-induced paranoia or irritability? How many diplomatic blunders were avoided despite her deteriorating cognitive function rather than because of her brilliance? It's a terrifying thought, suggesting that some of history's most pivotal moments might have been shaped by a queen slowly being poisoned by her own foundation. It's like discovering that a major world leader's most controversial policy decisions were made during a particularly aggressive bout of food poisoning, only with more lasting damage. The sheer audacity of the human spirit to endure such self-inflicted torment is almost, dare I say, admirable. Elizabeth, despite the pain, the disfigurement, the mental fog, continued to rule, to strategize, to maintain her iron grip on power. She refused to lie down, literally and figuratively, until the very end. It's a testament to her resilience, yes, but also a stark reminder of the extreme lengths to which people will go to maintain an image, even if that image is a thinly veiled lie. She was the original fake it till you make it queen. Only the fake it involved a lot of lead, and to make it involved an agonizing decline. What a twisted tale of power, vanity, and utter medical malpractice. This narrative, delivered by your friendly neighborhood midnight meme historian, isn't just about mocking Elizabeth I, it's about tearing down the pristine facades that history often constructs around its figures. It's about exposing the raw, ugly, and often hilariously stupid truth that lies beneath the pomp and circumstance. Elizabeth I, the original lead-poisoning influencer, is not just a historical curiosity. She's a Mia reflecting our own modern obsession with appearance, our susceptibility to trends, and our willingness to sacrifice well-being for the sake of an image. And if that does, then make you want to smash that like button for this brutal history roast, then frankly, you're probably still dabbing some questionable concoction on your own face. So, let's wrap this up with a challenge. My discerning viewers, think about the most absurd, self-destructive modern trend you've witnessed. Is it people eating raw liver on TikTok? Is it influencers promoting dangerous weight loss teas? Or perhaps the widespread belief that a detox juice cleanse will somehow magically reset your organs? What's the 21st century's equivalent of Venetian cirrhosis? The deadly beauty trend we're all falling for, oblivious to the slow, agonizing consequences. Share your thoughts in the comments, because if we don't call out the stupidity, we're doomed to repeat it, probably with even more filters and less actual historical context. And wouldn't that be a truly tragic, yet entirely predictable turn of events? Subscribe to Midnight Meme Historian if you enjoy watching dead people. Bad decisions and learning absolutely nothing from them.